Hello. Today we will discuss Chapter 3, Section 3 in our textbooks. Chapter 3, Section 3 is titled An Enduring Document, and it begins on page 99 in our textbooks. Enduring means lasting. So the Constitution is a lasting document. It has lasted a very long time, over 220 years. The main idea of Chapter 3, Section 3 is the Constitution is an enduring document that has met the needs of a changing country for more than 200 years. Think about these two questions as you read Section 3. One, how did the framers envision change when writing the Constitution? And two, what are two ways in which the Constitution may be changed? When the founders wrote the Constitution in 1787, they knew that our Constitution would have to govern a country for a long time, or at least they hoped it would. And their hopes have come true so far. But they knew that that document would have to be able to be changed, that as the future came, the document itself would need to be updated over time. So the founders wrote a way to change the Constitution. So the Constitution itself only has 7 articles. Article 1 is the legislative branch, Article 2 is the executive branch, and Article 3 is the judicial branch. And we discussed those 3 branches in Chapter 3, Section 2. They all have checks and balances over each other. Well, the Constitution in Article 5 discusses how amendments can be proposed and passed to update or change the Constitution. Since 1787, there have only been 27 successful amendments to the US Constitution. So an amendment is a way to add or change the Constitution, and that's happened 27 times in our country's history. There are 2 ways an amendment can be proposed, that someone says this should be added to our Constitution. First, Congress can propose an amendment by a 2/3 vote in both houses. So the United States House and the United States Senate can propose an amendment. Or the legislatures of 2/3 of the states, 34 out of 50 states, can ask Congress to call a national convention to propose an amendment. Once an amendment is proposed, then that proposed amendment can be sent to state legislatures for approval. All but one of the amendments to our Constitution were approved this way. So that is how almost all amendments have ever been done. The state legislatures vote on it. And if enough states vote for the amendment, it becomes part of our Constitution. Or a proposed amendment can be sent to state conventions for consideration. 3/4 or 38 of states must ratify or accept or vote to approve a proposed amendment for it to be added to our Constitution. Once an amendment is put in our Constitution, it could be repealed or canceled. And the most famous happened in 1933. The 18th Amendment was passed, and it made alcohol illegal, which was called prohibition in the United States. And then just a few years later, the 21st Amendment was passed, added to our Constitution, that just took away the 18th Amendment or repealed it, making alcohol again legal in the United States. The Constitution must be interpreted. Because it is a very short document to govern an entire country, many parts of the Constitution call for people in our Congress or our executive branch and the presidency or our courts or us as citizens to interpret different parts of the Constitution to decide what it means. For example, the Constitution says that the president can appoint people to give him advice on things like foreign affairs or dealing with other countries, or the economy and taxation for your country. But the Constitution does not say exactly how the president should do that. And so what has come to be called the unwritten Constitution means lots of things that have happened since 1787, since we first wrote the Constitution and approved it as our governing document for our country, the president, for example, George Washington, our first president, created what he called a cabinet. He appointed someone to give him advice about money. The first Secretary of the Treasury was Alexander Hamilton. He also appointed someone to deal with foreign countries. Thomas Jefferson was called our Secretary of State. And the president, George Washington, our first one, had these men come together, only men at first. Now lots of women have served in the cabinet. But the president calls these people together for advice on different topics, and these have come to be called his cabinet. And even though it's not specifically written in the Constitution, it has become an important part of our government and is in part the way that our government and our citizenry have interpreted the Constitution over time. Congress and the Constitution is the last part of Chapter 3, Section 3, and this section discusses how Congress has decided by interpreting the Constitution also what some of its powers are. So, for example, the Constitution says nothing about a minimum wage, but Congress decided, the House and the Senate, to make laws as the legislative branch, that it has the power to make a minimum wage for all people in this country, because the Constitution does say that Congress can control trade among the states. And so Congress interpreted controlling trade among the states to mean it can set a minimum wage for the nation. Now, the Supreme Court, as we discussed in Section 2, has the power of judicial review. It can decide whether the law that Congress passes is constitutional or not. So again, checks and balances, the different parts of government each have power over the other, preventing any one part from becoming too powerful. So that concludes Chapter 3, Section 3. Be sure to look at the questions at the end of all of these chapters and sections, because they help you realize what the important points are from that chapter above that you should know after you finish reading it. Thanks, and that concludes our Chapter 3 notes.